how do you use your post-nut clarity intelligently? This is a great thing to learn. So post-nut clarity is the shift in your headspace and thinking as a result of releasing your seed. And what tends to happen is you gain this immediate clear-mindedness, which feels a little bit like you've been kind of stripped back to a very raw and very sober state. And in this state, you're able to see things in a very, very clear way, almost uncomfortably clear at times. And you're probably curious, how do you actually use this kind of clarity intelligently? Well, what I'll do is I'll give you the core message now, and then I'll break it down even further later on in the video. So for now, using post-nut clarity intelligently is to make use of the clear-headedness and access to your intuition in order to really learn and really grow from your personal experiences. It is to understand that the clearest that you can see is often when you have no desire at all, and that the wisest version of you uses and appreciates such clear seeing and thinking when it comes around. That for me is the essence of post-nut clarity, being smart and using the truth when it comes up for you. So now that we've got the basic idea, what can we do with this? Well, I actually want to throw at you a very deep spiritual perspective, because one of my favorite things to do is to look at the deeper intelligence behind basically anything in life, especially something like this. And so for me, what post-nut clarity is, spiritually speaking, is it's the universe or consciousness basically sobering you up to get you to reflect on how orgasm, or whatever leads up to orgasm, is not it, is not the ultimate thing that you're looking for. It's almost like the experience is a clue or a pointer to not chase sex or orgasm. And that's because the end result of that is empty. It's dissatisfactory. It leaves you feeling incomplete rather than whole and one. So instead, what you prefer much, much more is something that fulfills you on a deeper spiritual level. Perhaps something mystical or metaphysical, something that involves higher states of consciousness. And that right there, that to be honest, is exactly where all the gold is at. Because all we're really doing in life is we are seeking higher states of consciousness to essentially remember our true nature as consciousness or the universe. That's what this game is that's happening. And yeah, it can seem pretty far-fetched to say that post-nut clarity is somehow a pointer to that. But I'll tell you the truth. The truth is, when you start to awaken and when your paradigm starts to shift more and more, you realize that every single thing in your life is a pointer back to God or the divine, especially something that causes you suffering. So really, this is actually a really high quality pointer and a high quality teacher, and not just some random thing. But to circle back around and to get a little bit more practical, you don't need to go quite as deep as that to begin with. Instead, what you can do is you can start to see how this experience really throws you into a totally different headspace, where there can be a real shift in how you feel, and not just mentally and physically, but also emotionally. You can feel vulnerability, or maybe a bit of kind of emotional disconnection or discomfort. And it's good to remember that these things, they're totally normal and totally cool. You know, it's important to really have perspective on this kind of thing if it happens. Now, another really useful thing to realize with this experience of post-nut clarity is that no matter how many times you kind of get the message, having made a less wise move with your sexual energy, the chances are it doesn't tend to stick. And that's because sexual desire, a lot of the time, is a much stronger and more potent force than your insights or realizations. And basically what this means for you is you need to do a little bit of work to kind of up the weight and up the presence of your insights and realizations so that they have greater influence on you and slowly become more and more powerful up against sexual desire. So to explain a little bit more about how to do this and how to use your post-nut clarity intelligently, I would say that it's all about integrating the insights and realizations that you have whilst you're in this very, very clear headspace. And what I mean by integrate here is to make yourself and your realizations one and whole. It looks like you realizing certain things like, whoa, pornography is definitely not the way, or whoa, casual sex is definitely not the way either. And then integrating these things to make yourself and your perspective more unified with these things that you realized. So it's a super useful thing to do for yourself and a great way to slowly outgrow those things which you know deep down you eventually want to move on from. Another really important thing that I recommend here is to reframe your entire concept of post-night clarity and to reframe it as a tool. And this tool, you can realize it does two main things for you. Number one, it sobers your mind so completely of sexual desire that you can kind of temporarily see into the truth of certain things. And number two, it offers you this kind of reflective space in which you can have, good realizations that will help you. And what's great about having this as a tool is any time that you release in the future, whether it's a relapse or just a natural release, you know that this space that you've entered into is a reflective learning space and not a time to guilt or shame yourself or feel however your lower self wants you to feel. Now, in general, people tend to arrive in this space in two different ways. And I will say one involves a lot more suffering than the other. So definitely choose wisely. The first is through a conscious release. This is where you decide to release on purpose, perhaps because you're feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or out of balance with your own energy. This can look like struggling to sleep or becoming emotionally stuck or blocked because you're having a difficult time transmuting the energy. Now, that being said, it's not always the right call to release naturally because generally speaking, you do want to do your best to keep going. And that's because the retained state is pretty much always the better place to be. But of course, there are times where that reset can really help you. So if you were to do that, obviously you want to be doing so without PMO and without lust in the mind. These are the two keys, the two things to avoid if you're ever releasing that will keep the experience here in the body and not happening here in the mind where lust exists. Now, the second and perhaps more common way of arriving at this post-night clarity state is one that I'll be honest contains a lot more suffering, and that is from a PMO relapse using pornography or being intimate with someone, but you realize that it's the wrong person or it's for the wrong reasons. Now, this I would say is where it gets a bit more real. And to use post-night clarity intelligently here, what you want to do is you want to allow yourself to really feel the feelings that are coming up and to really have the insights that are coming through. In other words, you want to allow everything that the experience is trying to show you so that you can help yourself to get the message. Now, interestingly, I would say a fair amount of people do tend to get the message, but what they don't do is they don't integrate the message. And that's because they move on way too swiftly. So to be smart with it, you want to integrate the message. And the way that you do that is really by sitting with what comes up, by feeling into the suffering, and by soaking up every last bit of what this experience is trying to tell you. And man, it can feel super duper unpleasant and super painful, but that's to be accepted. That is part of the process. And sometimes that's what creates the deepest learning. For example, to refer to my own path, I would say it was the really deep suffering that did it for me and forced me to grow and change. And it can easily be the exact same thing for you if you are properly listening and tuning into that suffering, genuinely trying to pick up on whatever it is that it's trying to teach you. So the next thing that I recommend is to seal the deal. And the way that you do this is by writing down whatever you've experienced and by journaling it. And the reason that you want to write it down is because your mind has a very funny way of making you forget all of the suffering that was caused by making the wrong kind of move in the past. And sometimes, no matter how deep your suffering was from a previous experience or relapse, sexual desire, it loves to come back and make you forget anyway, right? It's funny. So writing down your experience is huge because you get to revisit your insights and start to make sense of the truth in your words. And I find that if you reread your words that you've written, you'll see that they come from a very deep and very sincere place within you. And that's because at this point, you're just being really honest with yourself and you have nothing really to hide. So it's very, very genuine. So now the final step that I recommend to integrate this post-night clarity is maybe where most of the work is done. And that is in normal daily life, where you want to regularly contemplate how you have no intention to go back and return to that lower space and that lower vibration. And this involves thinking deeply about the kind of things that actually led you to that lower space in the first place, and how much suffering those things made you feel. And also just how much better off you are without those lower experiences in your life, right? You want to start shifting your thoughts, your words, and your actions, all to be in alignment with the kind of realizations that you had with your post-night clarity. This is often things like, don't message that person, don't click on that thing, don't allow yourself to fantasize about this thing or that thing. And what tends to happen is these small choices, they start to add up. And ultimately, they help you live and embody the things which you know deep down are really better for you and better for your growth. So now to start wrapping up, I want you to remember this following thing. Post-nut clarity will always be there as a way of teaching you that lower desire is not the way. Don't worry if you feel crappy, if you feel embarrassed or regretful afterwards. It is totally normal and something that every person goes through, right? It is your job to really use that suffering and to integrate it so that you can spiritually grow and develop as a person. And remember, a lot of the time you will need to have, this experience over and over again until it really starts to click. So take your time, no rush, and as always, burn through that karma that you need to burn through and live your life in the way that you feel you need to live your life. That is, after all, your karma. So don't resist it. Just go with whatever feels right for you. So, my friend, that is it for me. If you've enjoyed this video and you would like more, then as always, please do subscribe.